A millionaire invited his maid's daughter to play chess with him, as a joke in front of his wealthy guests. But he didn't know she was a chess prodigy, and that one game would shatter his reputation. If this story touches your heart, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. The sky over Malibu was streaked with shades of orange and rose as the sun dipped beneath the Pacific horizon, casting golden light onto the sprawling estate of Jonathan Barlow. The mansion, nestled atop a cliffside with panoramic views of the ocean, glowed like a fortress of opulence. Guests in tuxedos and satin gowns glided across marble floors, sipping vintage champagne and exchanging carefully rehearsed compliments. It was a night of calculated elegance, a charity gala organized to support Barlow's latest public initiative, The Future in Mind, a foundation allegedly aimed at nurturing intellectual talent in underprivileged communities. Jonathan Barlow, 53 years old, towering, sharply dressed in a bespoke navy blue suit and silver cufflinks, floated from group to group with the ease of a man used to being admired. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back with precision, and the sharpness of his jaw matched the cold efficiency of his business reputation. The guests, a blend of CEOs, politicians, influencers, and retired sports legends, had gathered in his glass-walled living room for one reason: to be seen with him and to be seen supporting the cause, whether or not they believed in it. Near the kitchen, away from the chandeliers and polished speeches, stood Lucia Alvarez. She was in her late 30s, wearing a modest black uniform, her hair pulled back tightly beneath a catering cap. For the past 6 years, she had worked as a part-time housekeeper in Jonathan's estate, never speaking more than a dozen words to him directly. On this night, she had been asked to help with serving hors d'oeuvres, just like many evenings before. But this time was different. Her daughter, Emma, had come with her. Emma Alvarez was 13, small for her age, quiet by nature, with a gaze that never wandered aimlessly. While her mother worked, Emma helped in the back, sorting utensils and replenishing napkins. She wore a plain gray dress and sneakers that had been patched twice. Her hair was tied in a neat braid, her posture straight, her eyes always watching, absorbing every expression, every micro-interaction in the room like a camera. At some point in the evening, as the guests gathered near the grand fireplace for a round of light entertainment, Jonathan Barlow clapped his hands. His voice sliced through the murmurs like a piano chord out of tune. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with the kind of charm that demanded attention, "since we're here celebrating young potential, I thought we'd spice up the night with a little challenge." A light laughter fluttered through the room. "I noticed we have a young lady among the staff tonight," he continued, pointing directly at Emma, who had just brought a tray of fruit skewers to a side table. "Come here, sweetheart. What's your name?" Lucia turned, instantly alert, but Emma simply placed the tray down and walked forward with calm, unfaltering steps. "Emma," she said quietly. "Emma," Barlow repeated as if tasting the name. "How would you like to play a game of chess with me? I have a beautiful board right here, Italian marble, worth more than most cars, I'm told." Several guests chuckled. One woman gasped in mock surprise. "Oh, come now," Barlow said to the crowd. "Let's see if kids from humble beginnings can still move a rook or two." The room tensed and released with scattered laughter. Lucia froze, her fingers gripping the hem of her apron. Her eyes met Emma's, silently asking if she wanted to walk away. But Emma only nodded once, slowly, and stepped forward. Not out of submission, but from something far deeper. A stillness inside her, a certainty. The chessboard was already placed on a glass coffee table between two leather chairs. The pieces gleamed under the room's golden lighting, hand-carved, weighted, and polished. Jonathan gestured to the black side and seated himself opposite her. "Be gentle with me," he smirked. Emma sat down without a word. "You'll let her play just like that?" murmured a guest to Congressman Lewis, who stood near the hors d'oeuvres. "This is going to be embarrassing." "Relax," Lewis replied. "It's all for show." Jonathan leaned forward, arranging the white pieces with theatrical care. "You ever played on a real chessboard, Emma?" "Yes," Emma said. "Not on your phone or with bottle caps on the floor?" "No, sir," she said. More laughter. Lucia remained near the archway leading to the kitchen, her chest tightening with each passing second. This wasn't a game. This was a performance, a mockery. Her daughter was being used for sport. But Emma didn't blink. Barlow opened the game with e4. A standard move, bold, aggressive. Emma responded instantly with c5, the Sicilian defense. A few of the guests raised their eyebrows. Congressman Lewis turned slightly. Barlow narrowed his eyes. "Interesting. You know that one?" Emma didn't respond. Barlow chuckled, playing knight to f3. "I studied under Grandmaster Cantu in Paris for a summer. He taught me the classics. Of course, I was much younger then." Emma answered with d6, calm as ever. The game began, and within 5 moves, the room started to quiet. Barlow played confidently, his tone casual and loud, as if narrating a lesson. But Emma's responses were precise, measured. Her hands didn't tremble. Her gaze never broke. Every piece she touched landed in the exact center of its square. By the 8th move, Barlow hesitated. By the 10th, Congressman Lewis had stopped scrolling his phone. By the 12th, whispers filled the corners of the room. A couple near the fireplace stopped mid-conversation to stare at the board. Jonathan Barlow leaned back, hiding his unease behind a forced grin. "Where did you say you learned to play?" "I didn't," Emma replied simply. The moment hung in the air like a glass about to shatter. Lucia's heart pounded. She had always known her daughter was different. Emma had discovered chess by accident, watching YouTube videos on the public library's computers when she was 9. She had borrowed books from donation bins. She practiced on a homemade board, taping squares onto an old cereal box. She read strategy at night under a flickering kitchen bulb, not because someone told her to, but because the game spoke to her in a way no person ever had. Barlow rubbed his jaw and made a risky move, pushing a pawn forward to challenge center control. Emma responded without flinching, launching a subtle trap. It looked harmless to the untrained eye, but a few guests, former players or well-read enough to recognize it, exchanged surprised glances. "Is she setting up a pin?" whispered a woman in a silver gown. "No," murmured Lewis, eyes narrowed. "She's building a layered structure. That's a Cambridge Springs trap." "What?" "She's baiting him." Jonathan Barlow didn't hear them. His mind was spinning. She was 13, a maid's daughter, poor. No access to coaches or clubs, yet the board didn't lie. She wasn't just lucky, she was good. He leaned forward again. "You know," he said, voice now lower, colder, "this was supposed to be a bit of fun, a lesson, something for the cameras." Emma looked up for the first time and locked eyes with him. "This is fun," she said. The room fell completely silent. No one laughed anymore, and for the first time that night, Lucia smiled. The marble pieces gleamed under the chandelier like frozen warriors locked in a silent war. Each square on the chessboard held a tension thicker than the air in the room. Jonathan Barlow once the master of ceremonies, was now the reluctant participant in something he hadn't prepared for, a battle not just of intellect but of dignity. Emma Alvarez sat quietly, her back straight, her fingers poised near her knight as if it were a tuning fork to her thoughts. She hadn't spoken a word since her calm, "This is fun," but her silence echoed louder than the buzz of cocktail conversation that had now died completely. The guests stood at the periphery of the game like spectators at a ritual. The chessboard had become a stage, and on that stage something remarkable was unfolding, an unraveling not just of a position, but of an illusion. The illusion that power came from pedigree, from wealth, from being born into the right house on the right hill. Barlow made a move, a bishop slide to g5, pinning her knight to the queen. It was a common, harmless tactic, but in his hands it carried more desperation than design. Emma responded instantly with h6, a quiet prod forcing his bishop to either retreat or commit. Lucia watched from the edge of the room, holding her breath as if her daughter's fingers were wired to her own pulse. She remembered when Emma was only 7, asking her for coins to use the library's computer. Lucia hadn't even realized at first that her daughter wasn't playing games like the others. She was watching old match footage, Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov, Judith Polgar. She watched them with the reverence other children had for superheroes. Back on the board, Jonathan hesitated. That, in itself, was a message to the onlookers. His fingers tapped against the wood of the table, betraying the cracks in his facade. "She's fast," whispered a man in a burgundy jacket. "Not rushed, just precise." "She's dictating tempo," said Congressman Lewis, now standing beside the board with his arms crossed. "Every move she makes pulls him into a new rhythm. He's reacting. She's leading." Jonathan smiled through clenched teeth. "You've memorized some lines, haven't you?" he said to Emma. "You've drilled some openings. That's all this is." Emma tilted her head, then responded in her usual quiet voice, "Openings are only 12% of the game." A soft murmur rippled through the room. "You read that somewhere?" Jonathan pressed. "No," she said. "I counted it myself. I analyzed probabilities." He blinked. "You what?" Emma didn't elaborate. Her next move was fianchettoing her bishop, g7, a subtle but sharp development that signaled long-term positional planning. She wasn't trying to beat him quickly, she was building a structure to bury him. Jonathan's jaw flexed. He pushed a rook up in what could generously be described as active positioning, but Emma's eyes narrowed. She saw through it instantly. To the casual observer, it might have still seemed even, but to those with trained eyes, the tide had already turned. "She's creating tension on the F-file," said a guest who had once played amateur club tournaments. "If she castles kingside now, it's over." As if on cue, Emma castled short, securing her king with flawless technique. Barlow leaned back and cleared his throat. "She's getting lucky," he muttered. Lucia winced. That line. She had heard it before, when Emma won the school's regional math contest. When she passed the logic exam, her private school classmates had failed. When people couldn't explain brilliance from places they didn't expect. Emma's face didn't change, but she was adjusting something in her approach. Barlow hadn't seen it yet, but she was setting him up, a trap that would take 10 more moves to spring. "Don't smile," she once told herself in a mirror, practice an interview she might never get. "People think it's arrogance. Just play." Barlow advanced to central pawn. It was a bold move, but premature. Emma's response was subtle, a knight reposition, unassuming yet deeply strategic. Congressman Lewis leaned to a woman beside him and whispered, "I think she's baiting him into overextension." "How can you tell?" "She's controlling space without looking aggressive. It's brilliant." Barlow hadn't noticed. He was looking at the board with growing irritation. He didn't like this feeling. Being unsure. He was the one people catered to, laughed at even when his jokes weren't funny, clapped when he announced initiatives that would never leave paper. And now, this girl, this maid's daughter, was pushing him into the deepest kind of discomfort. Doubt. "She can't really understand all of this," he said louder than necessary. She's mimicking something she saw." Emma looked up. "Would it help if I slowed down?" she asked. The room fell into stunned silence. It wasn't a taunt. It was a genuine offer. Jonathan's cheeks flushed. "No, thank you," he said with clipped control. "I like a challenge." Emma nodded, then played her next move, C4. It was the moment that Lewis realized what was coming. "She's going for a Marazzi bind," he said aloud. "She's sealing the center. He's done." Barlow pushed a rook in desperation, trying to create counterplay on the queen side. But Emma neutralized the threat immediately. Each of her moves unfolded like chapters in a novel only she had read. While Barlow scrambled for initiative, she focused only on precision, tension, and invisible lines of influence. She had no coach, no clock, no elite training camp in Prague, only hours, thousands of them, spent with borrowed books, cracked laptops, and online puzzles loaded 5 minutes at a time. The guests were no longer whispering jokes. They were watching something they hadn't expected to see. The daughter of a housekeeper was dismantling a man whose name graced buildings and newspapers. Not with cruelty, but with elegance. And perhaps most terrifying of all, she wasn't done. Barlow knocked over a pawn as he reached to play a bishop. His hand trembled slightly. He tried to make it look casual. "You've spent years on this, haven't you?" he said, almost accusingly. "To humiliate me?" Emma looked up, her expression as even as before. "No," she said, "to understand the game." Barlow didn't respond. Emma moved her knight again, and this time it forked two of his major pieces, a rook and a bishop. Gasps sounded. "God," someone muttered. "You can resign," Emma said softly. Barlow scoffed. "You want me to quit?" "No," she replied. "Just reminding you it's an option." Her tone wasn't mocking. It was informative. Lucia placed a hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wet now. She wasn't just watching a game. She was watching every sacrificed hour, every tear, every dollar they didn't have, being vindicated. Barlow declined to resign. He played on, sweating now under the $1,000 lights. But Emma was no longer countering. She was orchestrating. Everything he did was part of her plan. Another move, another threat, another trap, another silence. Emma finally leaned forward and said, "Would you like to stop?" Barlow looked up, his face pale. He started, then shook his head. Emma reached forward, her hand resting on her queen. Then she said something that no one forgot. "This isn't about me beating you, it's about me existing." Then she moved. Check. A stillness settled over the room, thicker, heavier than anything that had come before. The word check echoed not just from the chessboard, but into the minds of everyone present, as if Emma Alvarez had drawn a line across the floor, across their assumptions, across the hierarchy that had stood unchallenged for decades. Jonathan Barlow stared at the board. His eyes twitched from his endangered king to his queen, then to the rook, cornered, cut off, useless. He knew this look. It was the face of inevitability, being outmaneuvered so completely that not even bravado could save him now. She said, "This isn't about beating him, it's about existing," murmured a guest to his wife. "Can you believe that? The way she said it?" "It's the most honest thing I've heard in this house," she replied quietly. Jonathan Barlow cleared his throat and sat straighter, as though his posture could repair what had already been torn to shreds. You're calculating, I'll give you that," he said to Emma, "but I've seen tricks before. Gambits, flashy sequences." Emma didn't speak. Her hands remained folded on her lap. "You think you've got me cornered, don't you?" he asked, reaching for his queen, preparing a desperate defense. "I don't think," she said, voice even. "I know." He stopped. The words stung not because they were arrogant, but because they were true, and no one, not one person in the room, dared laugh any more. The mask of the evening had slipped. The glittering walls of wealth, the flowing champagne, the ornamental promises of empowering youth, they all looked dim now in contrast to the raw, undressed truth unfolding on a wooden board. Barlow made a frantic move, protecting his king but exposing his bishop. He knew it was a terrible trade, but he was playing with fire at his heels. Emma responded instantly, capturing the bishop with her knight, re-establishing positional dominance. Congressman Lewis leaned forward. "It's a squeeze," he whispered to the man beside him. "He can't breathe. She's locking him down." "She's 13, the man replied in disbelief. "How is this happening?" Barlow saw it too. Every move he made was a mistake, not because he lacked skill, but because Emma had designed a structure where everything he did would hurt him. She wasn't reacting. She was controlling. "You think this proves something?" he asked, bitterness rising in his throat. "No," Emma said, eyes still on the board. "I know it proves something." "Really? That you're smarter than me? That money doesn't mean anything?" Emma looked up. "That merit doesn't need permission." A wave of silence crashed through the room. Several guests looked down. Others looked at Emma with a respect they hadn't shown her when she entered with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Lucia stood at the edge of the room, one hand over her chest. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes wide. It wasn't pride she felt. It was something bigger, something sacred, a quiet witnessing of a promise being fulfilled. Barlow stared at her, at this child whose name he hadn't known an hour ago, whose mother he had employed for years without ever learning her favorite color, whose presence in his house had always been invisible until now. He looked around the room. The eyes watching him were no longer impressed. They were ashamed. For him. He had meant it to be a joke, a moment of mock humility to parade a poor child in front of the rich. And now, in front of those same people, he was being dismantled with elegance he didn't know how to fight. He reached for a pawn and paused. "You've been trained," he said. "Admit it. Someone's been coaching you." Emma tilted her head. "I trained myself." "Impossible." Emma turned her attention back to the board. "My mother brought me books from second-hand stores. I borrowed others from the library. When she worked late shifts, I stayed up and studied games online. I used broken tablets. I sketched boards on notebook paper." Barlow shook his head. "You can't become this good without a mentor." "Then maybe," Emma said softly, "your definition of talent is just broken." She moved again. Another piece gone. Another corridor closed. It was not just domination. It was artistry. Barlow's jaw tightened. His fingers flexed. His next move was sloppy, rushed. He barely noticed that his knight was now hanging. Emma saw it instantly. "You missed something," she said. He followed her eyes. Damn it. She took the night. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They watched as though they were in the presence of something sacred, like watching a musician perform a composition no one knew a child could write. Lucia could feel tears beginning to rise, not just because Emma was winning, but because for the first time in 13 years, the world was seeing her daughter for who she truly was. Barlow sat back in his chair. The game was gone. He knew it, but the moment hadn't passed yet. There was still something inside him, some instinct to fight, not for the game, but for dignity. "I didn't mean to offend you," he said, voice lower now. Emma looked up. Her eyes were not cold, only clear. "I know," she replied, "but you did." He nodded. Emma's hand rested on her queen again. The final assault was prepared. She had been waiting to play this combination. Every step had led here. Every decision, every retreat, every piece sacrificed had been a thread in a web now pulling shut. "You don't have to finish it," Barlow said quietly. Emma blinked. "Yes, I do." And she moved. Queen to h7, mate in 3. Barlow looked at the board. He tried to calculate, tried to find an out, but he saw it. There was none. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Lucia stepped forward, unable to hold back any longer. She stood beside her daughter, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a mother who had fought battles that the world never saw. Emma moved the final piece with surgical precision. "Checkmate," she said, not triumphantly, but truthfully. Barlow stared, not at the board, but at the reality that had just been written onto it. The room remained in stunned, golden silence. Even the orchestra outside had stopped. Emma stood. She reached across the board and slowly, respectfully reset the pieces, one by one, as if closing the book she had just written. And when she was done, she looked at Barlow one last time. "Thank you for the game, Mr. Barlow," she said softly. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Lucia placed her arm around Emma's shoulder. They turned to leave, but just before they did, a voice cut through the quiet. "Miss Alvarez." It was Congressman Lewis. Emma turned. "Would you be interested in a scholarship program?" he asked. "I know a few schools and a few national coaches." Emma paused. Lucia looked at her daughter. Emma nodded. "Yes, I would." He handed her a card. "Call me Monday." And then, slowly, respectfully, the room broke into applause. Not for a party, not for a host, but for a girl who came to serve and left having changed everyone in the room. 6 months later, the sun rose over the Stanford University campus, golden light spilling across red-tiled roofs and tree-lined walkways. Students hurried to lectures with laptops and coffees, heads down, minds buzzing. Among them walked a quiet 13-year-old girl, her steps steady, her eyes scanning her surroundings not with awe, but with curiosity. Emma Alvarez. She wore a navy blue Stanford hoodie 2 sizes too big and carried a backpack filled not with fashion magazines or gossip journals, but chess puzzles, notebooks, and a tablet covered in stickers that said "Strategy wins" and "Think ahead." Around her neck hung a modest lanyard with her student ID. She had been granted a full academic scholarship, personally facilitated by Congressman Lewis, who had followed through on his promise with all the vigor of a man who had just witnessed the future step into a room and sit down across from power. And win. Emma passed the engineering building and smiled faintly. Her scholarship wasn't just for chess. She had also placed in the top 1% of logic-based testing in a nationwide competition the previous month. Professors who initially assumed her results were errors had since stopped questioning them. She now attended special seminars usually reserved for students twice her age. Across the country, in newsrooms and TV studios, her name was still whispered with awe. Not because of her youth or her background, but because of how she had made people feel. That viral clip from the charity night had racked up over 11 million views. Not just because of the checkmate, but because of the quiet, calm dignity with which she dismantled the arrogance of a man who had thought himself untouchable. The video had become a symbol. A moment frozen in time when a maid's daughter sat across from a millionaire and proved that genius had no address, and that greatness could walk in through the back door, uninvited, and still own the room. Meanwhile, Jonathan Barlow's world had turned to glass. His PR team had tried damage control. He released a carefully written statement praising Emma's impressive skills and his commitment to developing talent. But no one bought it. The backlash had been swift and surgical. The gala donors pulled out. 3 board members resigned from his foundation. The Future in Mind initiative was quietly dissolved. His name was removed from a literacy campaign in San Francisco. Worse yet, his own board at Barlow Investments began to question his judgment. "You mocked a child," one senior partner had said in a tense meeting, "and then you lost in front of the country. That's not leadership, that's ego." Within weeks, he was asked to take a leave of absence. But Jonathan Barlow didn't disappear. He just watched. He watched interviews. He watched Emma on national television answering questions from journalists twice her age. He watched clips of her teaching young children how to think several moves ahead. He saw her featured in a Time magazine article titled "The Girl Who Changed the Game." He saw a girl who had been a joke in his eyes become a symbol of resilience and brilliance. And he saw himself in the background of every clip, forever immortalized as the man who underestimated her. But unlike the first few weeks, when he burned with shame and resentment, something had shifted. He stopped defending himself, stopped trying to control the narrative, and instead, he started listening. One day, he found a letter in the mail from Lucia. It was short, handwritten. "Mr. Barlow, you once asked if someone trained my daughter to humiliate you. The truth is, she trained herself to survive you. What happened that night wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And thanks to that moment, she has been. I hope you think carefully about the next child you laugh at. They might be the one who beats you, too. Sincerely, Lucia Alvarez." He folded the letter and sat in silence for a long time. Back in Palo Alto, Emma wasn't just studying. She was building. With the help of professors and nonprofit leaders, she launched a free online chess platform, Next Move. It was designed for kids from low-income families, connecting them with mentors, offering guided strategy lessons, and teaching not just chess but critical thinking, pattern recognition, and goal setting. Within its first month, over 2,000 students enrolled. One testimonial read, "Emma made me believe I could win, even when I don't have much." Lucia now worked as the guest services manager at a 5-star hotel in Santa Clara. Her promotion came with full benefits, better hours, and enough money to finally get a small place of their own. Just the 2 of them. She no longer wore uniforms. She wore what she wanted. She walked differently. Not prouder, but freer. One evening, after dinner, Lucia pulled an envelope from the drawer and handed it to Emma. Inside was a photograph. Emma sitting across from Jonathan Barlow at the marble board mid-game. Her eyes focused, her posture perfect. Behind her stood Lucia, proud but restrained. "I had it printed," Lucia said. "I know you don't like to dwell on that night, but it changed things. For both of us." Emma studied the picture, then turned it over. Lucia had written on the back, "Checkmate is only the beginning." Emma smiled. Months later, Emma was invited to speak at a TEDx conference. The auditorium was packed. Most of the crowd didn't know who she was, just that she was that chess girl. She walked up to the microphone and looked out at the faces staring back. "I want to tell you a story," she said. "Not about chess, but about perception." She paused. "Sometimes the world gives you a role, and if you come from the wrong place, they'll tell you that role is small, that it doesn't matter, that you're only here to serve, not to lead." She scanned the room. But every person has a mind like a chessboard, 64 squares of possibility, and just because someone only sees a pawn doesn't mean you aren't already playing as a queen. The applause that followed didn't come from obligation. It came from recognition. After the talk, a reporter asked her, "Do you have anything to say to the man you beat that night?" Emma smiled. "No, I'm not playing that game anymore." Jonathan Barlow watched the TEDx video on his laptop. Alone, in a smaller house now. He paused it at that line. "I'm not playing that game anymore." He smiled too, not because it made him feel better, but because he finally understood. He had tried to win a game of control, but Emma had been playing a game of truth. And truth, he realized, is the one opponent you never defeat. On the wall of Lucia's new apartment hangs 2 framed items. A photograph of Emma placing the final piece on the board, and beside it, the official certificate of Next Move, now a registered nonprofit with chapters in 5 U.S. cities. Underneath the logo are the words, "Not everyone starts with the same pieces, but everyone deserves to play." If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales like this. And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below.